Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Joe Beatar. Welcome to Houston Safari Club Foundation's Hunting Matter podcast. We are excited this week. We've got a really great guest with us. I had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman at our annual convention this past year, and Jason Koger is with us today. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. I enjoy sharing my story, and I had a great time at the convention in Houston.
Well, there were a lot of people talking about your talk with us, and there was a lot of people that were fired up after meeting you. So, thank you so much for taking time to join us this week.
Yes, for sure.
Let me tell our audience a little bit about you. Jason became the first bilateral arm amputee in the world to be fitted with multi-articulating bionic hands after losing both of his hands in an accident back in 2008. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that today. Jason, I kind of want to kick it off here. We're talking a little bit about the accident, but I'm really interested in knowing about your journey, after the accident. So if you wouldn't mind telling our listening and viewing audience a little bit about what happened, and then we can talk about what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I live out of Owensboro, Kentucky, right outside of town. I live on my grandfather's farm. It's about 2,300 acres of corn and soybeans, and my grandfather lives next door to me. And I got two uncles, which all my cousins live out here, and we're still out on the same farm. And March 1st, 2008, I decided to go on a quick four-wheeler ride around my grandfather's farm, and it's just somewhere I've been my entire life. And on that ride, I came in contact with a down power line, and I took 7,200 volts of electricity, and they life flighted me to Nashville, Tennessee. And as soon as I got to Nashville, and I didn't know they were going to amputate, but when you get electrocuted, it burns you from the inside out, and it
Mm.
causes poisonous toxins inside your body. So the poison and the damage of mine was in the hands. So when I made it to Vanderbilt, I remember the helicopter ride, and I remember going into a room that looked like a morgue, and that room is a hydro room where they actually take a pressure washer and they wash your dead skin off of you. I remember that room, and then 3 days later, I woke up from an induced coma, and I was a bilateral arm amputee, and I think that's probably right where my journey starts. A lot of people want to know what happened to me, but my journey really started that day I woke up because I was 29 years old. I lived 29 years with two hands, been able to do everything for me and or for myself. And I was married, and we had two daughters at the time. My oldest, her name was Billy Grace. She was 21 months old, and then Campbell was 3 months old.
Oh,
And
wow.
today I have a son now, but at the time that's all I had. And I remember laying in the hospital room and being told that I was going to be in the hospital for several months. I was only there 12 days, and really, people ask me all the time, it's like, how did you how did you keep that good attitude? And I tell people all the time is my faith and my friends and my family. Every single day I woke up, I thought, man, my kids still have to have their dad, and it's not my time right now, it's their time. And I just went over that every day in my head. I didn't know really how my life was going to change, but I knew that actually I had one goal when I was at the hospital, and I told my doctor, I said, if I can hold my kids in my arms again, then everything will be all right. And I had no clue what anything about prosthetics, and I held my kids before I left that hospital room, and I just had that peace about it, that everything's gonna be fine. One way or another, it was gonna work out. So.
Yeah.
Hunting Matters is sponsored by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Under the visionary leadership of founder Johnny Morris, Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's is leading North America's largest conservation movement. Together with their partners in conservation, they're positively shaping the future of the outdoors through donations, grant making, and advocacy. The 501c3 Outdoor Fund raises funds to support conservation efforts by activating more than 200 million passionate sportsmen and women, rounding up their purchases in Bass Pro Shops and Cabela stores and online. Visit BassPro.com or Cabela's.com today.
The whole recovery period. I've got a bit of a medical background, so I understand the hospitalization, the physical therapy, occupational therapy, the recovery, and all those things. At what point after the accident did you shift from I just got to stay alive? Did your mindset shift from I just got to stay alive to I've got to do something and live with a purpose?
When I was loaded up in the ambulance to go to Owensboro Hospital to get on a helicopter, My wife was in the ambulance with me, and I remember looking down at my left thumb, and that's where electricity came out, and I knew I was going to lose my left thumb. And I don't know if I was trying to calm myself down or if I was trying to calm her down, but I just kept on telling her, I was like, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to lose my left thumb. And that just kept on going in my mind. I had no idea they were going to amputate anything else. Got to Vanderbilt, like I said, and when I woke up 3 days later, and my dad was a drill sergeant in the Army. So growing up, we never had that. You cannot do something. We had to try. There was never a quit doing something, like, something that you love or life. And when I woke up, I remember asking for my dad to come in my room, and my dad walked in my room and he sat down with me, and I was strapped down to a bed because I also broke my neck and broke my back. And I remember, or had a small fracture. I remember my dad sitting beside me and him saying, Jason, we've always had faith. I don't know how we're going to get through this, but I know we will. And from that moment on, I literally, it wasn't about, I mean, obviously you thought about rehabs and getting better, but in my mind, there was nothing going to stop me from that very first day that I woke up. And, sometimes I had doubts on what I was going to be able to do, but man, I had my life, and that's all that I was worried about. And my family was going to have me, and my kids were going to have me, and really nothing else mattered to me at that time.
Tight network of family and friends and faith that really kind of, I mean, listen, all that big support system, that helps tremendously. But there's got to be that inner will to go on. Do you attribute it to your faith and your family and just your own drive? Have you always been a man of conviction, or did this incident kind of drive you to be a stronger man of conviction and value life even more?
I think it probably strengthened it, but I was very fortunate that my mom and dad raised me up in church, and I didn't know any difference anyway. You know what I mean? So I've always been to church and always had faith, and I think I think it'd be hard if I didn't say it didn't strengthen it, because man, the last 17 years have been way more than what I've ever expected from day one. I mean, so many things has happened in my life, so many good things have happened in my life. And, I always get a question is like, would you go back to March 1st and your accident never happened? And I can't, I wouldn't. I'm the kind of guy that I live for the future, or I live for the present. I don't live in the past. I never have lived in the past. I feel like, God has reasons for everything. And I think he has a reason that he wants me to share my faith with other people. And I just never look back. I just keep going forward.
You've often said, when I heard you speak for the first time, and I've read some of your writings and things, and seen you on other interviews and things. You said you live a life without limitations. And what does that phrase mean to you now in your day to day life?
I think whenever I first got home, I really, hunting was always a big part of my life. That's something I always enjoyed to do. I love to do. I got home, and as soon as, 12 days after my accident, I was released from the hospital. I got home and decided that I wanted to try to drive my truck. So I got inside my truck, and it might have took me hours to get inside, but I got in, got the door unlocked, got it started up, and I drove my truck around my grandfather's farm with nothing but two residual limbs. And the very first day, 12 days after losing my arms, and then I had this will and this drive to push myself as hard as I could, and every single day I tried something else. And just like, when I say something else, I'm talking about like the ADLs, trying to figure out how to feed myself and dress myself and the things that I had to do. But I think in the back of my mind, there was always this, will I ever be able to do the things that I absolutely loved? Hunting, fishing, boating. I could go on and on and on. Or is it just going to be the everyday things that I have to do? Dressing myself, clothing myself, bathing myself, all that stuff. And I'll go on. It was, I got hurt March 1st, 2008, like I'd said. In April of that year, so a month after my accident, I had a great friend that called me, and he said, "Hey, next weekend's turkey season." I said, "Yeah." I'm still bleeding. I'm still wrapped up. And he said, "I want you to go with me." And I said, "Man, I don't know if I can." And so I called my doctor. He and I became really good friends. And I called my doctor. His name was Dr. Jeffrey Guy. And so Dr. Guy said, I called him and I said, "Hey, can I go turkey hunting?" And he was like, everything was silent for a long time. And I said, "You there?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I go turkey hunting?" He's like, "Man, I have no idea. Like, why do you think you cannot do it?" And I said, "Well, I'm really worried about a tick getting inside my, what I had left and getting an infection and having to cut more off." And he laughed and he said, "Just spray off real good."
Yeah.
And so I called my buddy and I said, "Hey, I want to come." And he lives one county over, about 45 minutes to an hour away. And so he told me, he said, "Come up the night before and spend the night." And I'll never forget having that conversation with him. And I said, his name was Sam. And I said, "Sam, man, I can't even use the bathroom on my own yet. Like there's a lot of stuff I can't do." And he told me, he said, "Man, I love you like a brother. I'll make sure that I take care of you." And I was like, "All right." So I get to his house. And the thing that I had in my mind was I was going to be sitting next to him, watching him kill a turkey, which I was completely fine with.
Yeah.
And we were in his living room that night, and he laid this shotgun in my lap. And he said, "You're going to hunt tomorrow." I said, "Dude, there's no way. I have no prosthetics. Can't happen." And he said, "We're going to figure it out." So we took the two screws out of the butt of the shotgun. We put a ratchet strap and ran the screws back in it. We strapped it to my shoulder, had a tripod on the front with a radiator hose clamp and a string from the trigger to my mouth. And that's how I killed my first turkey. And, it was only a Jake. I'd killed longbeards before.
Yeah.
And man, that first bird that I'd ever seen that was legal to kill, I wasn't gonna let it pass by. And
Right.
man, there's a lot of tears that day, man. That was the very first day that it was something that I thought was going to be impossible that happened. And man, that changed a lot of stuff in my life.
That had
Burden off of you, a lot of doubts when you do that. I mean, listen. If you've ever been a turkey hunter, people who are listening and watching, you doubt yourself. They're the smartest, dumbest birds you've ever had to deal with. And I doubt myself every time I call them. Like, oh, I'm overcalling. No, I'm not calling enough. Or they're not coming to the decoys. They're not working the call. Whatever. I doubt myself every time I sit up against a tree and try to call turkeys. I can, and I have that release if I actually get to shoot a bird. Just I can't imagine the release that you had to go. Okay, my life can kind of get back to normal. I can do some stuff now.
It's funny. No matter how well you know this land, you always seem to get lost in it. That's because it's your escape, your place to reconnect to nature and yourself. At Capital Farm Credit, we're proud to help people like you purchase recreational land where you can hunt, fish, four-wheel, or simply get lost in. To learn how we can help you secure land like this, visit CapitalFarmCredit.com. Capital Farm Credit. Together, we're better.
And I still didn't even have anything. Like, I had no idea about prosthetics at the time. Like, I had no clue what was going to be out there. To be honest with you, even backing up, I literally thought I was going to be the first upper limb amputee in the world. Like, I had no clue there was anybody else like me out there. And I told my wife, I said, if I ever find anybody that is like me, I will make sure that I'm going to teach them, because, you're right. You said something about going to therapy. I did go to a therapist to help with, scar management and when I got prosthetics. But the lady I worked with had never worked with an upper limb amputee before. So even though she had the textbook side of it, she had never done it before. So it was me and her learning together. And I just remember I told my wife over and over that I would share my story on every platform I could share it on, so that I could be an encouragement to other people. I want to be able to help anybody. And I have done that over and over and over. If I hear of a story that makes national news, I try to find the person. I try to reach out to the person. I know we'll probably get into some of the stuff that I've done nationally, but, I did some national TV, and the very first thing I did was CNN.
Mhm.
And whenever I was on CNN that night, the next day, my phone started going off, and there was prosthetists and therapists and other amputees and a whole lot of other stuff that people were finding me and they were calling me, and that gave me that next push of people do need people like me to teach them stuff. And man, from that moment on the phone calls, it has been a whirlwind of very awesome, neat stuff has happened in my life for sure. It was unbelievable. And and then I was in the union, so I was a pipe fitter at the time of my accident. And the union, the president of the UA actually reached out to me, and he's in Washington D.C. and his job is to work with the president. So he's pretty high up, obviously, and he heard my story and he reached out to me, and I'm very confident that there were some strings pulled for me to become the first person in the world with two bionic hands, and it was because my insurance said yes. And obviously that's why I was on CNN the first time, is because I was the first in the world with, and here's the hand, the myoelectric bionic hand, and it was man, from that moment on, I think it opened up doors, but I also had to be that person and have that attitude. It wasn't just about the hands. Obviously, it was the story and the things I was going to do after people found out who I was.
There's not a lot of people who have that human condition and that mindset that they can feel comfortable speaking publicly. Have you always been comfortable in groups and crowds? Is this part of your makeup, or is this something you kind of go, okay, now I've got an audience now, I've got to kind of work on, speaking publicly?
So I failed public speaking in college. Like, that was the only class I failed, and it's funny because it's something I never wanted to do. It's something that I just honestly I didn't feel like I had a story to share. And then whenever my accident happened and I got some of these opportunities that I've had and to share my life with other people, man, I just I knew, again, it goes back to my faith. I had a guy tell me one time, I was speaking, and he came up to me and he's like, "You know what, man? I've never believed in God. I've never had faith, and I've heard the stories of walking on the water and all the unimaginable stories that's in the Bible." And he was like, "Nobody can prove that stuff to me. They can't show me pictures. They can't show me videos. Yes, there's words in a Bible, but I don't even know who really wrote the Bible." And he kept on telling me all this stuff. And then when he heard my story, he came up to me after and he gave me a hug and he's like, "Man, I realize what God has actually done in your life, and I can see it. I can see what you've gone through, and I truly believe the reason you are where you are is by your faith." So, that was a huge testimony for me to be able to be like, you know what, I don't need to sit back and not let other people know who Jason Koger is, because at the end of the day, um, this really isn't my story. I think it's God's story. You know what I mean? I truly feel like he put me in this place to share a testimony with others, and man, I do my best to just do that. To my real life experiences and the things I've gone through and how I overcame.
More of us than others, myself included. It's the only reason I'm going to say this. We have a problem getting out of our own way and looking for those signs and looking for those things. That's a really great story that your friend was like, "I was waiting on a sign from God," or "I was waiting for this one and the other," and there it was right in front of him, and he had that moment of clarity to kind of go, "There it is. There's your sign." Is that as what's his name, the Bill Engvall used to say, "There's your sign." That you were the sign. Tell us a little bit about. So you're the first person to be fitted with multi-articulating bionic prosthetics. Tell us a little bit about that science and that process, because it's unique to you, but it's unique also to the people that have created this field of technology. Hunting Matters is presented by Copandero Indoor Archery Pistol and Rifle Range, your premier indoor archery pistol and rifle shooting destination. Located in Oak Ridge North, right next to the Woodlands, Copandero offers two 25-yard pistol ranges, a 100-yard rifle range, and a 25-yard archery range.
Whether you're honing your skills or just starting, Copandero has everything you need, including rentals, classes, a retail store, an in-house cafe, and a VIP lounge. Join Copandero today for an unmatched shooting experience. To learn more, go to copandero.com.
Yes. So the hand and being on CNN opened up a door for me to work with this company. And this company is based out of Scotland, is where the engineers are, and Iceland's where the home office is. And then they have a home office in California and in Ohio. Um, but basically, when I feel there's sensors laying on my muscles, so when I feel like I raise my wrist in the air, that's what opens it. And when I feel like I lower my wrist, that's what closes it. And then when I co-contract and I feel like I'm flicking my pinky out, it tells it to go and wrist rotate. So then when I lower my wrist and I'm just holding my wrist down, or I hold my wrist up. And so basically, whenever you talk about five the fingers all move. There's 6 motors in the hand. So it's multi-articulating because there's always been like a myoelectric handout since the 80s probably, but it all opened and closed as one. It was just open and closed and that's it. But this one here, since it has different motors, you can stall out fingers. It doesn't matter which one. And so whenever you grab a hold of something, like if I was to grab right here, it stopped those fingers. So it'll go against whatever shape, whatever size thing that I'm trying to hold. The hand is not strong enough to really hurt anybody. That's another good thing. It does have a firm grip.
Yeah.
But once I grip onto something, it stops. And then whenever I close again, it starts vibrating down, and I can feel that vibration, knowing that I'm grabbing something harder, but not hard enough to actually crush a can or a bottle. Or that's what most people think. It's so strong. It's like Superman.
Yeah, they hear the word Bob and they think of Steve Austin from way back when, and they unfortunately they didn't fit you with the G.I. Joe Kung Fu grip yet.
On the hunting side of it, so I killed my first turkey.
Yeah.
Then I remember killing my first longbeard. The first deer I killed a 150-inch deer the year before I was injured, which was my biggest deer at the time. And then the first deer that I seen after my accident, I was using a crossbow. It was a button buck, and I was like, man, I can't kill a button buck. And I was like, yes, I can. And so, like, I remember the first deer, and it meant so much to me. And I think in the hunting industry, that's where people kind of mess up. They forget the reason they hunt. It's about the memories. It's about the people you share the outdoors with. It's not about the size of an animal. And I was in the same boat, and then I realized like how special it was to be in the woods with close friends, and now I end up killing the 16th biggest whitetail in the state of Kentucky in archery. Not ever, but the year that I killed mine, and I'm like I've killed a deer sitting on the ground. I've killed a deer sitting in a climber. I've killed a deer sitting in a tree stand. I've killed one with a rifle, a muzzleloader, a crossbow, and every one of them that I've mounted, it's a memory that I've had of, hey, I don't know if I'll ever be able to climb in a deer stand, and I did it, and I got proof of what I killed. You know what I mean? Like it just takes the memories and man, the hard work and the dedication I had, it just brings it to reality. And I've been able to go on a pig hunt, and who knows what else will happen in my life, or the opportunities I'll get with hunting or speaking or doing anything else.
Yeah, I want to talk. There's another hunt that involves a crossbow and a barrel I want to talk about here in a few minutes. But what is it, the day to day of using and maintaining, a bionic hand? I'd have ketchup and fried food and I'd motor oil, whatever else on that. How do you, what is something, what's the day to day like? What is something that people would be surprised of? Because obviously you keep that thing clean, but me, I'd be, I'd be messy. I'd mess it up. It'd be all stained up. So is there something that, that you have to do day to day to be careful, or do you, tell us a little bit about that?
You have body-powered prosthetics, which have been around since the Civil War days. It's the straps around your shoulder.
Yeah.
These are like 150 grand a piece. Those are 30,000 a set. So, if I'm going to do something rough and tough, these really are not waterproof. And I know there's hands that are waterproof, but all the brains is inside here and it's not waterproof
Okay.
on any hand. So if somebody hears waterproof, you can't jump in the water with it, right? You can't get it submerged. You can get a little rainwater on it, doesn't hurt. But if I'm going to go hunting, I'm going to have my body powered on because I don't have to worry about sensors or temperatures or wetness or sweating or anything else. So I tell people, like, if I have work clothes on, I have my body powered hooks on. Not that these can't do it. Um, I feel more comfortable because I would rather tear up a $30,000 set of stuff. And I tell people, like, prime example is if you owned a Lamborghini and you had a work truck, you're not going to drive your Lamborghini whenever it's raining outside or down a dirt road or a rock road or anything else. You're going to drive it down the highway and you're going to keep it clean. And then if you're going to go mudding, you're going to drive your four-wheel drive pickup truck. It's basically the same thing. Prosthetics is a toolbox of things, and you cannot do everything with just one thing. That's where I wear a hand on one side and an ETD, this is a myoelectric hook, basically. And I wear it because it's the size of it. I can get inside my pocket. I do have a hand. It just unscrews and I can pop the hand right on. But, I keep my stuff in my left pocket just like anybody else. And, if I had a fanny pack or a backpack, I could, not have to have the myoelectric hook.
Right.
But I like to keep my stuff in my pocket just like everybody else does. So
Our buddies would make fun of us if we had a fanny pack on sitting in the deer stand, wouldn't they? You're probably like me. I've got some friends who I consider good longtime friends, and they have no problem giving me grief on just about anything. I'm sure that's something to kind of help keep you in check as well. Like, hey, these guys are treating me just as bad as they did before the accident.
absolutely. I told them not to change the way they treated me. And my brother-in-law actually bought me some shirts when I first got home. One of them he gave me to in the hospital, but one of them says, "Look, Ma, no hands." And the other one says, "Don't shoot, I'm unarmed." So when I wear those two shirts around, people feel more comfortable to come up to me. And that's the only thing that I would tell people is, like, if you see somebody like me, if they don't want to talk about it, they're going to tell you. They're not going to try to be rude about it. I mean, you might meet a person or two, but for the most part, I would much rather somebody come up and be like, "Hey, man, what happened to you?" And me tell them, like, I am different, and people need to know that there is different people, and they look different, they talk different, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm very happy with who I am. I've got to do some really, really cool stuff. When I did the CNN, I got a phone call, and I don't know if you was going to talk about this later, but I'm going to kind of throw it out there because we was talking about it a minute ago. But I got a phone call from a lady in Hawaii,
Mhm.
and I got asked to do an episode on Hawaii 5 called the Hookman episode. And it was a remake of the 70s of a guy that had two hooks, and they wanted to do a guy that had two bionic hands, and I was the only one in the world that they could find. So they hired me. I went to Hawaii, and I shot this episode on Hawaii 5 and I was really just going to be the arms. And they hired RoboCop from the 80s. It was going to be his face. So basically, I was just a body double, and I was only going to be there for 3 days to do a few things, and then I was going to be done. And they made some hands where RoboCop had basically a glove on that looked like this, but you could definitely tell it was a real hand in a glove. So once I got there and we started working together, and it was funny because I'd never met an actor before, and here I'm fixing to meet RoboCop, and me being alive in the '80s, man, that was like the best movie, classic movie. Everybody knew the movie RoboCop, and I was like, man, I'm gonna meet this dude. I can't believe it. So I went up on set, and he was laying on the ground, and he had the same looking clothes I had on, and the producer said, "You see that guy laying on the ground?" I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, that's RoboCop." I said, "Yeah, I know." And they said, we need to get your hand pulling the trigger of a gun, but we need to get his face. And I said, okay. And they said, so can you lay on top of him? And I was like, really? They were like, yeah. So I started walking over towards him, and I basically was spooning RoboCop, and I got to laughing, and he looked over at me and he said, boy, what are you laughing about? And I said, man, you're the first dude I ever laid on top of, and I don't even know your name. I didn't even get to meet you first. And he goes, yeah, I know. You're the first dude that's ever just laid on top of me without me introducing myself or talking to you. And so from that moment on, we had a really great relationship. We became really good friends. I ended up spending 2.5 weeks filming that episode. I did have a cameo in the show, and that show cost $6.5 million. And every single day, CBS was calling and asking, "Hey, is that kid performing? Because if he's not, we got to cancel the show." There's a lot of stuff riding on me being able to perform, and they were like, "Dude, he's killing it. He's killing it." And then the last night that I was in Hawaii, Peter Weller asked me if I want to go to dinner. And I was like, man, it took me 2.5 weeks of spooning you to get asked to go to dinner. And so we went to dinner, and he gave me his cell phone number. And he was like, man, I want you to keep in touch with me. I said, okay. And I gave him my number, and I made it back to Kentucky. And I told my wife, I was like, I'll never talk to him again. Like, I don't know how you call an actor. I mean, do you just call them, say, what's up? I mean, they're busy, and they have 100,000 people trying to call them. And so I got home, and I don't know, maybe a month went by, and my phone rang one day, and I looked at it, and it was Peter Weller. I was like, man, I wonder what he's doing. So I answered the phone, and he was like, hey, Jason. I said, yeah. He goes, did you know they were making some new bionic hands? And I said, yeah, but man, my insurance won't let me have it. And he goes, that's all right. And he said, I called them, and I told them that if they want their name mentioned on Hawaii Five-0, they are to send you the newest set of bionic hands. And that's when I became the first person in the world for a second time with the newest bionic hands. And it also opened the door for me to be an ambassador for Oser that makes the bionic hands. And so now I've been the first person in the world 5 times. And every time they come out with something new, I'm the first to get it. I talk to the engineers all the time. And
Hunting Matters is presented by DEA Ranch. Are you looking for the ultimate South Texas hunting experience? Then look no further than DEA Ranch. DEA Ranch offers some of the best whitetail and exotic game hunts in South Texas year-round. Whether you're looking to fill your freezer or put that next hunting memory on the wall, their professional guides are focused on ensuring each client has a memorable and exciting hunting experience. DEA Ranch offers guided hunts, professional staff, chef-prepared meals, trophy preparation, and more. To learn more, go to dearanch.com. That's dearanch.com.
And another story about Peter Weller is he called me one day and he said, hey, Jason, I want to come to Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And I said, all right, why? And he said, I just want to come. So he flew into town, and he came to my house, and I decided to have a little party for him. And we had this little get together in town, and I charged $10 a person to get in. And the next day it was $18,000, and I gave $18,000 to 7 different local charities. And went right before Peter Weller left my house. I asked him, I said, man, why did you come to Kentucky? And he said, I've never met anybody that has inspired me as much as you have. Mm-hmm. And he said, I just need that in my life, and I want to surround myself with people that you surround yourself with. And he said, that's why I came to Kentucky. Yeah. And man, me and him has became so good friends. And I'm actually going to go see him this coming Sunday. He's coming to Chicago. So I'm going to go hang out with him for a little bit on Sunday. And hadn't seen him since COVID, so it's been a while. I talk to him all the time, but it's been a while since I've seen him. So it's just stories like that. And I could go on for 3 or 4 hours and tell you stories like that.
Well, the moral of the story here is spoon up to your favorite actor. Right. You never know what'll happen. Let's talk a little bit about this bear hunt you went on. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so a guy called me one time, and he said, hey, you want to go on a bear hunt? I said, sure. Mm-hmm. So we went to Canada, and I took my crossbow, and man, I bet we saw 40 or 50 bears before I harvested the one that I harvested. And so anyway, I harvested the bear, And after I harvested, I found out, as far as anybody knows, I became the first person in the world to kill a bear as a bilateral arm amputee during archery season. And so I had a big article written up about it. And, right after I got home from that, I got asked to actually go to Africa and do a safari hunt. But at the time, I just felt like, it's super hard to travel that far, not being a great user. And now I'm probably ready for it, but I'm sure there's a lot a lot of firsts are still going to happen.
Right, right. So what part of Canada were you guys in?
We were in right outside Alberta. We flew into Alberta, and we were in Hudson Bay, is what it was called.
Yep, yep. That's bizarre because I actually worked with a guy for quite a few years that was from that area, from Hudson Bay. Do you have any other first ever goals in mind down the road? You got your eye on something right now, or just kind of take it as it comes?
I always take stuff as it comes, but I've never killed an elk. I don't know if it's ever been done as a bilateral, but I've never done it, and that would be a first for me. And I love big game. That's what I really like. So I'd say there's going to be a lot of firsts for me on the big game side. But I actually have been talking to a doctor in Houston that is thinking about doing a new procedure, and I don't really know a lot of stuff about it. But one day they want to help me get my feeling back. That's probably the hardest thing that I have to deal with, is reaching inside my pocket. And it blows my mind now because I understand what it was like when I had hands. But to reach in your pocket and get a penny or a quarter or a dollar out, or your keys, or feeling if something's hot or cold, or you know silk or cotton, or just all the senses that you have in your fingertip, just blows my mind that your brain can process that so fast. And this guy is trying to figure out a way to get some of that sensation back. So I've definitely been talking to him, and it hadn't been done to a bilateral for sure. I think one guy has, or a couple people has tried it. So I don't know. We'll see. We're talking about it right now, anyway.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's stay in touch on that because I definitely am interested in learning more about that. You came out with a book a while back called "Handed a Greater Purpose." Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write that and what you hope people will take away from it. Nobody wants to imagine an emergency on a hunting trip, but when the unexpected happens, you want the team of medical and security experts at Global Rescue to be there for you. Global Rescue Operations Centers are staffed by experienced personnel, and you'll always speak to an expert on the first call. Global Rescue provides unparalleled capabilities to transport members to the hospital of their choice, not just the closest. So trade what ifs for peace of mind with convenient travel services designed for the unexpected. Learn more at globalrescue.com/hunting matters.
So before COVID, a lot of stuff's happened, right? I've been on CNN. I've been on CNN, Dr. Gupta. I did Hawaii 5-0. I did a movie with Matthew McConaughey. I did an Apple commercials on the Super Bowl. Became the first person in the world with bionic hands. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And for a long time, people were always like, man, you should write a book, dude. Like, you've done some things that have basically just landed in my lap. I haven't really reached out for it. It just kind of happened. And I was like, yeah, I know I need to. But having the time and the want to sit down and write a book, it was like, man, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time. And then what happened? COVID happened, and we couldn't go anywhere. And I was like, you know what? It's the perfect time for me to sit down and write a book. So I sat down and thought of a name, handed a greater purpose. And I truly feel like I was handed a greater purpose. And I feel like every day that I wake up, that there is a reason for my accident, and there's a reason for me. And I have, I just feel in my heart that, like, this is what God really wants me to do. And I wrote that book not knowing if I'd sell any. But I thought, you know what, my kids will at least be able to read my story one day, or my grandkids, or my great grandkids. And then I was like, you know what? If I sell some books, I can help other people out. And I realized that there's people out there that has never, other people that's been an amputee, whether it's a single or a bilateral or a quad or whatever it's been, and they've never been around somebody like me. And I've had the opportunity to fly around the country and meet people and work with people that are brand new amputees. And I do that basically free of charge. And some of it comes from my books, and sometimes it's me sending books to those people to help them to share a story, because even though I think I had the attitude that I was going to get through my life one way or another, there's people out there that give up way too easy. So I thought, you know what, if somebody can read my story and be like, man, if he can do it with no arms, I can do it. If he can do this, I can do this. And it's really, man, I think I've sold a couple thousand books now, and it's been really good. It's been good for me to sell them and give some away, and the money that I've received off of it, put it back and do really cool stuff with that money.
Are you looking for an investment that goes beyond the ordinary? Wildlife Partners is the nation's leader in breeding and consulting for the exotic wildlife industry. When you invest in wildlife, you're not just acquiring a 100% tax deductible asset, you're playing a vital role in the conservation of endangered species. Do you own land? You can turn your ranch into a profitable wildlife driven business. And even if you don't own land, that's no problem. Wildlife Partners offers unique opportunities for non-landowners to invest in conservation while enjoying significant tax benefits and potential cash flow. Make a difference that pays for you and for wildlife. Visit wildlifepartners.com and discover how your investment can create real impact. Was there anything when you were writing the book that was kind of I kind of write a little bit too, and I find that when I start writing, then I kind of head down these paths and these little things that I'm like, oh yeah, this sounds good or that sounds good. Was there anything, in that process that was kind of an eye-opening moment for you, or you just was just head down writing?
So at first, I had a guy help me write it. So he was a ghostwriter basically, and I told him my story. And when we first wrote it, we wrote it in a way that we thought maybe it could be a movie, like a script.
Yeah.
And then we let somebody read over it, and they were like, "Man, we need to change it around." And so we changed it a little bit. And one of the things that really hit me more than anything writing that book was listening to everybody else's story. So in my book, I have Dr. Guy. He wrote a chapter in it. I had Peter Weller. I had Alex Olafin, which is McGarrett on Hawaii 5 I had my mom, my dad, my sister, like my wife, like multiple people said stuff in there that I don't remember. Like when I was in a coma for 3 days, how did my parents feel? And how did they feel when you wake up and you tell your son that he lost his arms? And how do you wake up as a 28-year-old wife that wants to have a husband and has all these dreams of whatever she had dreams of, but it wasn't of marrying a guy that didn't have arms, right? And how are the kids going to adapt to having a dad with no arms? And man, I think the story that hit me the most was Dr. Guy. And I went to Nashville, Tennessee, and I sat down with Dr. Guy, and he said, "I'm going to tell this story one time." And he said, "I'll never say some of it ever again." And I was like, okay. And he started sharing it. And like every 10 or 15 minutes, he would stop and say, "You're going to have to excuse me." And he would leave the room and cry. And I was like, man, I touched him so much. And I was in the burn unit. So in the burn unit, you don't see great patients. You see patients that have been in meth lab blow ups, or you've seen child abuse, or he has seen some of the nastiest stuff that you can see. And then to have somebody that was so outgoing and determined to live again, it just really touched him. And man, there was times I cried listening to him, and
Yeah.
and I think that part of the story really hit me more than any of it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I was just curious because you start sometimes when you sit down and start writing or you start putting all the pieces together, you're like, oh, That right there, that's good. And that's just what you relayed. That's something that really, impacted him, impacted you, and all those sorts of things. It's just that's neat that you're able to reflect back on that. Um, you constantly talk about overcoming challenges and things like that, but closer to home, you hear these stories about celebrities. Let's say Matthew McConaughey. I've heard him talk about his kids. He's like, my kids don't know I'm famous, and they don't care. They don't care I'm an actor. Um, we're, as fathers, we're expected to teach our kids about overcoming challenges and adversity, and hopefully build them up to be strong men, down the road when we're not around and not watching them and those sorts of things. Um, do your kids look at you differently, you think, or do they look at you and go, that's my dad. He's dealt with that, or what is your role in their life beyond being just their dad that you've stepped up and taught them about overcoming adversity?
I think my kids, um, I hear them talk sometimes, and I hear them tell stories of, yeah, my dad can do that. And I think the older they get, the less I hear them say stuff. But I think that they see other people like me, other people that's lost limbs, and all of them that has struggled and didn't want to live or tried to commit suicide or just would rather somebody take care of them instead of going out, and doing anything with them. So my girls are older now, but my son, he's 13 and he plays baseball. So almost every night, me and him go to the garage and I throw baseballs to him and he hits. I got a batting cage in my shop.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to be able to throw balls just like any other dad can.
Yeah.
And I tell him all the time, I'm like, sometimes I feel like he thinks that I want him to do a sport more than he wants to. And I just told him this the other day. I said, his name's Axel. And I said, Axel, it ain't that I want to do it more or this is why, I want you to do it because I love doing it with you. I see I see something in your future for this. I see how dedicated you are and it makes me happy that I can be a part of this journey. And I think in return, I think, obviously when I go to his school or the girls' schools, everybody thinks I'm like super cool. And my kids, and my older girl, and Axel's getting there. Axel's like, he's not that cool. He's not that cool. But his friends think that I'm super cool. You know what I mean? Because they haven't been around me. It's something different. And then for me to do the TV stuff, I don't think my kids think anything about celebrities. I've been around a lot of celebrities. Now, if it were to be me hanging out with Taylor Swift, my girls would probably be, oh man, that's so cool. But the people I've been with, they're just like, it's kind of normal to them now. And I try to include them in everything I do because they are the reason that I fight so hard. You know what I mean? It's and I think adversity,
Mm-hmm.
I think for them to be able to see somebody overcoming something, there shouldn't be an excuse for them to sit back and not try, not work hard, and not be dedicated, not be determined. And I think it's I think it's a huge benefit for them to me be their dad to see this. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
live by example.
The Houston Safari Club Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports the future of hunting and conservation. Wildlife and habitat conservation, youth education and outdoor experiences, scholarships, and anti-poaching efforts are just a few of the programs supported by this organization. Monthly events, an annual convention, award-winning publications, networking opportunities, and valuable resources for hunting knowledge are just a few of the benefits of being a member of Houston Safari Club Foundation. If you're searching for a group of people dedicated to protecting the future of hunting, look no further. Join Houston Safari Club Foundation today at wehuntwegive.org or call 713-623-8844.
What you just said, that mindset of, I got this situation now. Here's how I'm going to do it. I mean, you've taken this as an opportunity to serve as an example of your kids and other people, and along those lines of that line of thinking, what message would you leave people who may be listening to this podcast or maybe watching it that are facing a life-altering moment? I know it's a longer conversation that we don't have time for today, but what kind of message would you give them, that says, "Oh man, I'm going through something really, really bad, whether it's physical, mental, whatever." What advice would you give to them?
So John 13:7 says, "You may not understand now, but one day you will." And I think a message for me would literally be, you may not understand why you're going through these hard times or dark days, and you've got to you just have to understand that there is a reason, and you may not realize the reason until you're in heaven. I mean, till you pass. I don't know. I can't answer that, but I know that there's always a reason, and there's a reason for the season, and I think that is probably one of the verses that I go to more than anything, because man, it gives me hope. It
Yeah.
really gives me hope. It gives me an outlook on life that, man, I mean, life's not supposed to be easy and fun all the time, right? We have to overcome stuff, and we just have to believe. And that's all I would say is you just have to believe.
Yeah.
Even in the hardest days, you just have to believe that it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great advice. Jason, how can people find out about you, get your book, reach out to you I'm sure there will be people reaching out, not as big as CNN, we don't want to brag here, but if they want to reach out to you for speaking engagements, things like that, how can they find you?
So I'm on all the social media stuff. I'm on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and all that kind of stuff. But I also have a website, and I'm right in the middle of actually redoing my website. It's
Okay.
jasonkoger.com. So it's JASONKOGER.com.
Yep.
You can get the book on Amazon as well. But I try to tell people, like, if somebody writes me on Facebook or Instagram and messages me, I would rather send them a book straight from my house so I can sign it, and they can Venmo or whatever, and I can send them a book that way. And in a way, it's more personalized than Amazon.
Yeah.
Um, I'm pretty easy to find, and man, I watch all my social medias myself, so I always get back with people. I love hearing people say, "Hey, your story inspired me," and that gives me another reason that I got to keep going too. I mean, this whole world needs each other. We need to lean on each other. It's not about me. It's not about them. It's just we all have to lean on each other and help each other out. And that's what it's all about.
Exactly. Facebook.com/Jason Koger official is your Facebook page.
You know how to get a hold of me too. So
I absolutely will.
more than willing to share my info.
Absolutely will put them in touch with you. Thanks so much, and hope you have a great rest of your week.